There is an additional passage that I will include to anchor my reflection from the beautifully crafted liturgy for this very important event in the life of our church, the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, found in Psalm chapter 108. It says, "My heart is steadfast, O God. I will sing and make music with all my soul. Awake harp and lyre, I will awake the dawn. I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples, for great is your love, higher than the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens, and let your glory be over all the earth. Save us and help us with your right hand, that those you love may be delivered. God has spoken from his sanctuary. In triumph, I will parcel out Shechem and measure off the valley of Succoth. Gilead is mine, Manasseh is mine, Ephraim is my helmet, Judah my scepter. Moab is my wash basin. Upon Edom I toss my sandal. Over Philistia I shout in triumph. Who will bring me to the fortified city? Who will lead me to Edom? Is it not you, O God, you who have rejected us and no longer go out with our armies? Give us aid against the enemy, for the help of man is worthless. With God, we will gain the victory, and he will trample down our enemies." Good morning to everyone. We are gathered today to celebrate God's goodness in the lives and in our lives and the lives of our institutions, our constituency, our partners both in the private and public sectors, friends, on the occasion of the 73rd founding anniversary of the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, and blessing of the newly built United Shalom Medical Center or United Shalom Hospital, formerly Bethany Hospital. We are celebrating today amidst a health crisis that has claimed the lives of millions of people across the globe. India records an unprecedented high of COVID cases after it lost grip of the illness like a train rampaging off course. And the irony in this era of globalization is that India, let us recall, is the world's biggest producer of COVID-19 vaccines, yet they are desperately wanting. As if fate is not yet done with this country, one hospital north of Mumbai was gutted by fire, killing several COVID patients and hospital staff. Ultimately, the health crisis we are currently facing has brought us face to face with our own finitude, our own mortality, our own death. Is celebration an appropriate response to this misery we are facing? Certainly, whether we like it or not, we could not help but celebrate and thank God, because no matter how miserable life is, no matter how wounded we are in our personal and collective life, we must never forget that our presence today is a gift and a hope that as long as there are people healed, fully well and alive, there is work to do to express our love for God and humanity in the face of daunting obstacles we don't have control. And since we have a God who has total control over all life's verities and excesses, then we can fully celebrate. We celebrate because amidst life's challenges and affliction, there is promise of healing. Lives are healed, wounded hearts restored, broken relationships mended, and efforts seen in a new light, like the reconstitution of the old Bethany Hospital, now named United Shalom Medical Center, which we are about to consecrate. However, a celebration can only be meaningful and profound if you bring with you the pains, hardships, difficulties, and troubles that went with the success of every noble endeavor. It is for this reason that I wish to highlight my thoughts that I shared in 2015 to the churches in the East Visayas jurisdictional area after Typhoon Yolanda ravaged Eastern Visayas in 2013, and the ensuing rehabilitation efforts of our local churches, communities, and the institutions of our church. It is important for me to highlight these thoughts to you again because they speak more powerfully today than at the time when they were first uttered. In that reflection, I used the vision of Prophet Ezekiel in his encounter with God in the Valley of Dry Bones to capture God's promise of physical restoration and new beginning. It says, during that time, there was death around, the bodies lying in the streets, lifeless, the roofless houses and objects that were scattered in the streets, the fallen trees in disarray, and they were many, were like dry bones, and they were everywhere. In the vision of Prophet Ezekiel, he found the valley of dry bones deeply disturbing and distressing. This encounter symbolizes the crisis and destruction that Israel as a nation had endured. And before this sight, the voice of the Lord was heard by Prophet Ezekiel saying, "Son of man, will these bones live again?" And the prophet answered, "It is you, O Lord, who knows." Then the Lord said, "Behold, I will open your graves and raise you from your graves, O my people, and I will bring you home into the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and raise you from your graves, O my people." Now, one of the questions raised to me many times over was the question, will Bethany Hospital rise again? Deep within me, I answered, "It is you, O Lord, who knowest." And God said, "Go and tell those whose hearts are unforgiving and as dry as bones that I will let the institution breathe again, and I will put flesh and lay sinews upon it and cover it with skin and put breath in it, and it shall live." End of quote. I shared these thoughts at that time, full of confidence that this vision of Prophet Ezekiel in the life of Bethany Hospital will come to pass. Today, indeed, it has come to pass. From the grave of despair, mockery, humiliation, doubt, and skepticism, the hospital has risen. It will be blessed today. It will be consecrated today. But as I've said, celebration can only be deeply meaningful and profound if the contrast of suffering and victory humiliation and vindication will be brought to the fore. This is the core of King David's praise in our text. It says, "O God, my heart is fixed. I will sing and give praise even with my glory." This is a hymn of praise after David acknowledged the hands of God at work that rescued him from utter humiliation. It would have been very easy for David to take the credit himself after routing their enemies from all sides that conspired to humiliate, destroy, trample, demean the people of God that he led. But he did not. In a very public manner, he gives credit to the Lord. Just like what we are doing today. We celebrate today to let the public know our gratitude to God and humbly recognize God's guidance and direction after successfully using us, leading toward the eventual reconstitution of the hospital now called the United Shalom Hospital. Let us therefore ask ourselves these questions as we look back over the past years and consider the events, the circumstances surrounding the restoration of Bethany. Did we honestly allow ourselves to be used as instruments in the recovery of God's healing ministry in this part of the country so that we can say credit belongs to the Lord? Or did we openly and actively conspire to bring down whoever was tasked to restore simply because credit only belongs to those allegedly entitled to perform such recovery plan? Do you think the existence of Bethany more than fourscore and a decade happened because of your ingenuity, sacrifices, entitlement, or intellect? Or do you give credit to our Creator for bringing us together to a work that badly needs cohesion, teamwork, and understanding? I still have to see this coming in this jurisdiction and local churches working together in the days ahead, because in the past, this was utterly wanting. The humiliation I endured was still fresh in my heart in a dialogue organized by Pagmata right in this church after I was heckled and booed before a mob of Bethany employees which filed a multi-million case against the UCCP for illegal dismissal, when in truth and in fact, it was Yolanda who fired them. It was in the middle of that vicious exchanges that Joselu Lolong Velasquez, a former church elder, whatever position he has in the church of Tacloban UCCP, succumbed to a heart attack right in the third pew, left side of the aisle facing the pulpit, after he spoke defending the unity of the church. My judgment cannot be farther from the truth that he was hurt and offended by the scorn and nasty invectives hurled against the bishop of the church and the national leadership. Many of you did not know that my deep friendship with Lolong dates back to our Sunday school days in Ormoc City, UCCP, when we were still kids before they migrated to Tacloban. That would seal his sympathetic gesture toward me after he passionately uttered these words, "I will pray for the bishop, I will pray for you," pointing to the moderator of that conversation. "I will pray for the unity of the church," after which, a minute or two while sitting on the pew, he had seizure. He succumbed. Lolong died. After I received the invitation that I will speak on this occasion and the blessing of the newly built Bethany Hospital, thoughts on that fateful day and the disgrace I endured came rushing into my head. It wasn't easy for me. So I was looking for a text that would be sympathetic to my feelings, words that would stand on my behalf, furious, angry, but I couldn't find. Instead, the words from the psalmist I chose to reflect declares, "O God, my heart is fixed. I will sing and give praise even with my glory." My brothers and sisters, what need I say? I have to praise and thank God for all that has been favorable or unfavorable. I then ask myself, what made the psalmist declare praises to God amidst a national disaster that humiliated and dishonored God's people? I found the answer in the next lines, so that God's beloved people may be delivered. Therefore, I will sing and give praise to God. Awake psaltery and harp. I myself will awake early, the psalmist declares. Let us reflect on these words. You know, I have difficulty sleeping. In 2005, while I was in the States for the entire year, I suffered insomnia. In 2007 and 2008, for 2 years, it recurred. For the longest time, from 2008 onward, I recovered. But in 2020, after the outbreak of COVID-19, I suffered again because of pressure of work, anxiety, legal suits that seemingly redefined our civic duty as feeding the hungry and the lumens now constitutes a crime, a cause for community pantry advocates and organizers to be worried. When the psalmist declared, "Awake psaltery and harp, I myself will awake early," on my part, having sleepless nights, waking up early is no longer an issue. In fact, I felt like I'm the one waking up the rooster to crow and the sun to rise. This becomes a sacred task you need to endure when sleep escapes you, and while everybody is asleep, you act like a watchman waiting for the rooster to crow and the sun to rise. This I did with all my remaining strength to defend the interest of the church.
Curiously, there is a list of nations uttered in the next and following line. Shechem, Sokol, Gilead, Manasseh, Ephraim, Judah, Moab, Edom, Philistia. Why the list? Let us remember that Edom is the mortal enemy of Judah, and so with Moab and Philistia. Why they were included in the list was a product somehow of intense battle raging in the mind the psalmist had issues with. And if you have insomnia, this will haunt you from evening till morning. But here is the message. Here we are taught to recite the names of our enemies so that by reciting them prayerfully, we become closer to them and somehow know them intimately. By this discipline, if I remember people who have hurt me, threatened me, filed a case against me, humiliated me, instead of cursing them, deep within me I will shout, "Edom, Moab, Philistia, Moab, you are my watchpot. Edom, I will cast out my shoe." It is wise to be biblical when you are angry. But it needs great patience before Edom, the enemy, will be transformed into a prayer. Because Edom until now continues to be noisy in the social media, spreading out lies even within the church and elsewhere to establish their kingdom. putting off my ability to live out the presence of God, but conscious that one day I myself will be renewed by God and will transform Edom, the enemy, as part of my prayer life. This is how significant Edom is to me, that someday will be transformed into a prayer life. In verse 10 to 13, our text says, "Who will bring me into the strong city? Who will lead me into Edom? Will not you, O God, who has cast us off, and will not you, O God, go forth with our hosts? Give us help from trouble, for vain is the help of man. Through God we shall do valiantly, for he it is that shall tread down our enemy." End of quote. Edom is my enemy, but an enemy who is close to me, has personal knowledge of, and becomes part of my prayer. My sustained prayer for the kingdom of Edom in Psalm 108 has provided me the vision to transform sword into plowshare. This is the key toward building a future where healing and reconciliation reside. As preliminary activities to our Diamond Jubilee celebration has begun, we look forward to its culmination 2 years from now, wrapped with exciting transformations in the life of our institutions, particularly our hospitals, as we embark partnership agreements to sustain their viability through expansion and modernization. Our gratitude to God for sending us partners to complement these efforts amidst daunting challenges, not only to our institutions, but to the entire life work of the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, local churches, its ministries, facing all forms of constraints, but transform all these into opportunities. More than 70 years ago, it is worthy to note the magnanimous spirit of our past leaders, buffeted by issues of national importance that threaten to divide the church. Bishop Diaz said, "We have gone through severe testing. We have been tested by fire, by famine, and by adversity. What remained of Christianity would be the best index as to its life and strength and its future." At some point, Bishop Sobrevenia remarked, "My task now is to work harder in the interest of the evangelical church in the Philippines and promote better understanding and real fellowship." End of quote. Now, all these gravitated toward healing from a past riddled with animosity and misunderstanding. Let us therefore walk together prayerfully to push all our plans and effort big time in the context of newer ramifications of ministry and service, all for God's glory and honor. In behalf of the leadership of the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, let me greet and congratulate one and all, brothers and sisters here and across the globe, a happy 73rd Church founding anniversary. God bless everyone.